Teenagers who smoke cannabis regularly suffer a drop in IQ. New research found the habit may disrupt developing brain circuits and also that cutting down later in life doesn't reverse the effects. Well, the CEO of Mentor UK, Paul Toohey, joins me now, and joining us from Bristol is Peter Reynolds of Cannabis Law Reform. Welcome to you both. First of all, Mr. Toohey, I mean, is this research that you recognise from your own experience?
Yeah, I mean, this looks like a really comprehensive study. It is very, very interesting and we welcome it. It's been done over many, many years, but I think that from our perspective at Mentor, where our expertise is about trying to protect young people from drug misuse, it's really highlighting this issue about the brain not being fully developed until you're in your early 20s.
So adolescents are much more vulnerable to this chemical intake than anyone.
Yeah, I mean, it's obvious. I mean, you're not going to give a Scotch whisky to a 10-year-old. That would be a silly thing to do, wouldn't it? Same issue would be with you're smoking certain substances. If your brain is not fully developed, if the internal organs are not ready for it, it can't deal with it in the same way. So substance misuse for young people, we need to be doing a lot more to protect them from the harms and dangers that reports like this are showing us.
And Mr. Reynolds, would you agree with that, the evidence suggests that cannabis is harmful for teenagers?
Absolutely agree with what your other guest said. I mean, I think the crucial point about this report is it doesn't really tell us anything new. It confirms what we already know. And it is self-evident that any psychoactive substance on the developing brain is going to be harmful. But what we also have to take careful note of is that Professor Merritt has also said today, quite unequivocally, that cannabis is safe for adults. And the problem is, what this really highlights is that the policy we have in place at the moment is unfit for purpose and completely irresponsible. Because the only ID that a dealer asks for is a £20 note. What we need to do is take the cannabis market out of the hands of organised crime and put it into a regulated system where it's available to adults only.
OK, well, I mean, this is the key question. I mean, how legislators should react to confirmation of this information. I mean, we've seen what's happened with the tobacco industry as more and more research has come about the dangers of tobacco. How do you feel legislators should react?
Well, from Mentor's point of view, I mean, we're just really concerned that regardless of debates as to whether or not issues like cannabis should be legalised or not, the issue is still the case is that there are a lot of young people partaking in substance misuse, and there is not.
So what's the best way to protect them?
Educate them. Actually get proper good practices in schools and with parents who educate kids about the dangers of substance misuse. We still do not have PSHE, that's the main vehicle that this country has for getting through issues like sex education, drugs education. It's not mandatory. Schools don't know what to do in a lot of cases. We get calls at Mentor from teachers saying we'd really like to do some decent evidence-based drugs education and we don't know how to do it. That's fundamental. Absolutely fundamental. And when it comes to sort of younger children, I mean, with the issue of alcohol as opposed to cannabis, which is a separate issue in itself, you know, as a substance misuse issue, alcohol is far, far more bigger concern to us than the issue of cannabis.
But that surely is the point, Mr. Reynolds. If alcohol abuse is more widespread amongst teenagers, a lot of people would say, well, that's because there's no criminal risk in it and their parents do it anyway. So legalisation of cannabis would have the same effect.
Alcohol is regulated. Alcohol is regulated, and it's a scandal the way this government has allowed the relaxation of regulation on alcohol. The fact that, you know, the alcohol companies have been able to develop products that are more palatable to children. It's also a scandal, you know, that effectively what we've done is abandoned our children to the dealers on the street. You know, the fact of the matter is that people use cannabis. This isn't some theoretical...
But you believe that legalisation for adults would actually help with this problem?
Absolutely, and there's evidence to support that. If you look at all the countries where there is legally regulated availability of cannabis, such as Holland, 17 states in the US, the Czech Republic, consumption by children is lower, the age at first use is higher. You know, as I said, this is not some theory. The fact of the matter is that in Britain we consume over 3 tons of cannabis every day. People want to use cannabis. And it's not surprising because people have been using it for over 5,000 years. And so what we need to do is take responsibility. Instead of being irresponsible and just trying to sweep it away under the carpet, we need to take responsibility, regulate it, make it available through licensed outlets where they insist on seeing any ID if there's any doubt about your age. And as we've just heard from Professor Merritt today, cannabis is safe for adults, a great deal safer than alcohol. And indeed, as Professor David Nutt said the other day, you know, if there was a legal regulation of cannabis, he believes that alcohol consumption could go down by as much as 25%. And that could transform public public health.
OK, thank you, Mr. Reynolds. I mean, we're going to have an argument, though, aren't we, about when's an adult an adult? I mean,
well, I mean, you know, exactly how long...
You're saying people in their 20s...
I think you'd be really careful if you go around saying things like, you know, this substance is safe, just on the strength of that. Because, you know, what does safe mean? If it means that I can do that, but it's harming my life chances of things I can do... We know, for example, that with alcohol, young people who do alcohol can end up with 3 GCSEs less than if they hadn't. If you run that through its course, if you run it through for cannabis users, and I'm not an expert in that aspect, but what we do know is it might be, in quotes, safe, but if it doesn't mean you don't achieve your full potential, your best well-being, that's a whole different issue. So we've got to be very, very careful about the terminology we start using when we come around substances, which we still don't fully understand. And when the brain is not fully formed until you're into your early 20s, I think there is a real danger that we can get young people thinking that this is safe.
These substances do exist.
Yes.
And the question I'm asking you, we've heard the proposals, Mr. Reynolds, but how do you think adolescents will be better protected? I mean, how under what framework?
Under the framework of having a decent, structured educational system in our schools so that young people are free to make a choice, and under a system where parents fully understand...
Well, a choice whether to take cannabis or not.
Yeah, well, it's not just that, but a choice whether, you know, we have a very laxed approach. I think the alcohol concept that Mr. Ross brought in is a really valid one, but I don't want it used as a sort of for and against. But I find it, you know, people today think it's comfortable in a summer barbecue to give a green bottle of beer to a teenager because they're in a responsible setting. We now know that the brain is not fully formed and that they get a taste for alcohol and they start using it regularly, it can harm their chances. That's the issue. Young people should not be getting involved in substance misuse when they are young because it's harmful to them. We have to do more to protect them, and that protection should start with parents and in the classroom.
Mr. Reynolds, if adults are consuming these substances around you, it's human psychology, isn't it, that younger people want to imitate it?
But young people are already using cannabis. You know, I mean, the fact of the matter is that it's easier for children to buy cannabis than it is for them to buy alcohol. I agree entirely with your guest that children should not be using psychoactive substances. And if you're talking about an educational programme or study, then clearly it's absurd to be using any psychoactive substance if you want to succeed in it. You know, what we need to do is be pragmatic about this. Recognise that the cannabis market exists. The cannabis market is worth $6 billion a year in Britain, at least. And there's good independent research that shows if we were to take it over, tax and regulate it, consumption by children would fall, the dangerous forms of cannabis would be reduced, and it could produce a net gain to the UK Treasury of up to 9.3 billion every single year. And that would pay for an awful lot of education and an awful lot of interventions with children. You know, what we need to do is get real about this, be pragmatic, and stop doing the same thing over and over again, which we've already proved doesn't work. I mean, we're dealing with this problem now. Children use cannabis. Giving them better education in school, with respect, whilst it's an admirable objective, is not going to work. We need to do something about the availability, and that means get the dealers off the streets.
Okay.
Get cannabis into licensed outlets.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. And finally, Mr. Tu, I mean, what you should be saying is neither the prohibition of cannabis nor the licensed permission of alcohol, at the moment, are managing to protect children.
Well, I think all those things, whether it's legal or not, that's not a factor in whether young people use. They're not frightened off by the fact that if I use cannabis, I'm going to have 8 percentage points of my IQ strikes off. That's irrelevant to a young person. There has to be different evidence-based controls in schools that really do work to show that young people should be growing up healthier and more respectful in their well-being, so they can achieve more in their life and be decent human beings. And that's the be-all and end-all for us. Scaring people with health taxes, etc., is not going to stop them drinking, smoking, cannabis or whatever. What we have to do is get proper educational methods.
Smoke now, don't they?
Yeah, smoking is wrong, and that's come about through education. That's come about through the social norm. The social norms have changed from 30 years ago from smoking.
OK, thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you.